Hey everybody, I am Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today it is another fun watercolor lesson with my husband John on the mic.
Hi guys.
So he's not just keeping me company in this lonely studio, he's tracking me with cameras and making sure the robot cam gets real close into the project. And sometimes he might even ask a question because as someone who doesn't paint regularly, he may understand the kinds of things that you might be curious about. Let's look at the materials we're going to use and jump right on into this fun project. We're going to be doing a mountain valley with wildflowers, mostly because you guys asked for some mountain watercolor lessons that were super easy for beginners, and I said, okay. All right, so I have a 9x12 block of 140-pound watercolor paper. The block means that the sheets are glued together and you cut each sheet off. This prevents what's called buckling in watercolor. I have the core mini set. It has cadmium yellow primrose, it has nickel yellow, it has transparent pearl orange, it has pearl red medium, it has quinacridone, it has Dox purple, it has ultramarine blue, it has phthalo blue, it has sap green, I think is what it is, transparent brown oxide, burnt sienna, and my favorite, the Payne's gray. I like the Payne's gray from this line because it travels really far into the water and I enjoy that effect. Now, normally I kind of wash out a little bit of a wash with my brush, but I'm going to do something kind of cool. I've got my little interesting sprayer here. I'm going to spray to prime my half pans, and I'm going to spray to get my pad wet. Now, this doesn't do big water droplets, and that's going to let me really spread out my water a little bit easily.
What are you using there?
I am using the 3/4 oval. So this is a pointed oval. I think this actually is called a cat's tongue in the line. But for sure, it's a pointed oval wash, and it is by Silver Brush. It is in the black velvet line. I'm going to add some more water to this because I want a really emotional sky. So you can see that the paper is shiny. You couldn't swim in it, but it certainly isn't dry. And I'm going to come right here a little bit, and I'm going to get just a smidge of this wonderful yellow. This is my nickel azo yellow. It's one of my favorites in this. And this is going to imply just a little bit of light into my sky because I felt like I wanted that, John. I'm going to actually switch maybe to a smaller brush, maybe not. Hard to say. Probably am going to go to my round just so I can have some control mixing. I'm going to get it wet thoroughly. I'm swishing it in the water. I'll take off a little bit of the extra, but I'm going to come over and add a little brown to that little pan. And the other interesting little color I'm going to add is a little ultramarine. This will make this sort of natural gray sky that can happen sometimes, and you can see it's like doing its little weird I'm gonna blend through the water, and I'm doing in this upper right corner, just wiggling my brush. I'm gonna come around this yellow through here, and notice that I've left little white spots. That's because I am letting some of my clouds just happen as the bleed and transfer occur. I'm going to come down here. I'm doing very light colors because I'm going to build up. In watercolors, we work our lightest to our darkest. So you have to paint all your lightest colors first. Whatever you think you're going to have that's super light, you want to hit those right away. And I'm just barely got any pigment on my brush. Man, I'm wondering if you guys can see it. Can you see it, John?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I'm just putting that down here. This is actually below the view of my mountains, but they're much darker, so...
It is a very light light.
Now, I'll go ahead and get a little of my phthalo into this, which is this poppier blue, and I'll get a little bit umber. See how that does? Woo! A little more of the phthalo. Let's get a lot of water into the brush, but I don't wash all the pigment out. And that's going to let me add some of this, just a couple of places, into my clouds. And that kind of defines a little cloudish line. See how we do?
Mm-hmm.
We wiggle our little wiggle down, wiggle up, come around, wiggle. That's pretty nice. I like to do that. And then I'm going to make some little soft, that swirls down here. These are like little stratas, I think. That's what I'm making, John. Little stratas, little loose up high bits.
I like it.
Yeah, I'm just going to have it be just kind of chill. I'm going to go ahead and get a little purple into that mix and a little more blue. I'm going to do an interesting thing here. I'm going to come along and we get just a small amount. And we're going to talk about something so far away, and it's soft, and we can barely see it. See how we're doing? So far away. I go up. I went up at a little angle, and then I'm going to kind of come down on my little roller coaster. Now, how this is working is the paper is still a bit moist, but it's not shiny wet. And that tells me that my paint will soften, but it won't travel very far. See how where it's traveling where it's really wet, but it doesn't travel where it's less wet. So the paint goes where the water is. Now, I'm going to come along here and maybe add just a bit of a darker little edge just on some of that. And as I'm coming back up this hill, I'm going to lighten it. There we go. That's all we got to do. But we've got these little mountains here, right? Like you get. And now it is pretty dry. It's not going to bleed out. It'll give me somewhat of a hard edge, but not a completely hard edge. I'm going to just pull this down some. I don't want it to bleed too far. And I'm not going to take it too far. See how we're doing?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to take a little bit up here, but I'm going to let that be for a minute. That is going to create a little bit of shading for me later on. I'm not letting it travel too much. And I can even come in at this stage and start to lightly say, there's a thing there. Now, as your paper's drying, it's going to let you get harder and harder edges. And if you want to get a nice little mountain, you'll have to let that rest a little bit and dry. You want it to be matte, not shiny, and you don't want it to feel damp. I'm going to continue working in that sort of mountain color that I pulled out. And I'm going to come up where I had initially put in that soft little line. Right? And I'm going to come here like this. And then I'm going to, on the toe of my brush, just very lightly pull this down and come into this little hill. You can even come and add a little bit of a sharper line on that. You don't have to do it all the way because we want some of the softness in here. Now I want to leave some of this forward facing unpainted because I'm trying to say that it's brighter. And I will come right here. And you can also bring some of this back for another type of mountain that could be back here as we're working. Now, one of the things that even if you don't have a reference and you weren't painting along, which you are now, I'm pulling some water out of my cup and pulling all of this down. That also is letting me soften my inside line a little bit. And you can see, sort of wander this around, making some value here. If there's a bright light on one side, it does mean that you do need to take some paint and darken the back side of your hill, right? Because they're just really cones that are coming up, right? I think that is even going to help me inform, make some of this a little bit darker back here. And then I find it's helpful, if you get a chance, I might even get a little more blue in there, to come down and make a softer but second implied little line of something that could be coming down. That's how we get that down there. I really like that. Now, here we get another interesting little line of somebody going, and I'm going to put a little more blue into that. And this time I'm going to add a little green. And let's come into this space and just talk about just a soft little tree line. And if you think about tree shape, it's important to think about the places that they live. You can see I'm sort of wiggling out little branches. The fact that their environments are unpredictable and season to season, and it's okay if it bleeds up into the wet area. I actually like that when that happens. I like playing the very sharp edges versus the very soft edges. You just want to make sure that what you're painting as trees, I'll get a little more blue and green, but I don't want it to be my darkest pigment because I'll be making my pigment more rich as I come forward. Now I just want to talk about some little tree shape. They're more tender and small at the top, a little blendier, and then as they come down, they widen out. That's what they do. Maybe a little more blue. And you can always just bring them along here. And then what's really fun is when you come into the soft spots that are still wet, you can see that your tree softens. This is what happens. And I'm just on the little toe of my brush, and I go up, 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 up in a thin little line. And what's going to be hard for you, being new, I've got to rinse out my brush. I've got too much pigment, too saturated. And so sometimes you'll see me make those corrections. You just want to make sure that you're talking about this as it's coming down and it's just getting lighter and more distant. Over here. Now I think I could have a little bit of something at that space, but I think it's going to be nice to lighten this so you can see I pull that water along that bottom edge. But I'm also going to get a little bit of my pigment and come over here and make some distant foliage. And it's really just about wiggling up and down and trying not to repeat my patterns and just coming along the bottom. Can you see that there, John?
Oh, yeah.
Little lines of trees. Think of it as like you've got to give the creatures that live in your mountain valley somewhere to hide. Sometimes they just need somewhere to be. And I'm just putting this off in the distance. It's a little bit smoky. It's a little bit distant. All right. We're doing pretty good. I might pull up some of this extra water right here. But I do want to bring a little bit of a kind of forward wash here. I may avoid some of where my previous pigment is, like maybe right here. Mostly I'm going to come down and get that pretty wet. I think it's fun to grab a little unexpected pop of color, like maybe I'll take my two reds here and mix them together and just add some of that. We'll add some really bright, hard pops where the edges are hard, but let's do some of these little bleeds while we're here and thinking how nice it would be if we had flowers. And then I'm going to take a little of my favorite, which is the azo yellow. You can see that's just such a warm yellow. And I'm going to go ahead and get some of my green right here. And every once in a while, I'm going to mix those two together. And I'll go ahead and talk about these two little edges. So see how I'm pushing the little brush up and it makes another little line of something. And then I pull back. The pigment is light on my brush. If I rinse and drag off extra, it pulls a little pigment out, but not all the pigment out. Which is sort of interesting to me. And I may even come right here and create another little line of little bushes, little thoughtfulness. Sometimes we call it that hue over there, a little thought, a little hue over there. We're very grateful for those. I'm going to get another little bit of my green here and get a little blue in that and just come here talking about all the different little spaces that we could be having some of this color. And you can see it's like, because it's almost like a new tender green. And I can bring that here. I can even get some of my phthalo into that, which will make it that cooler green that you can sometimes need in your landscape. And you let the bleeds and blooms happen because they almost will create some of what you're looking for in your space. I'm going to get some of my green and my phthalo blue together, even like right there. I made a little drop. It actually doesn't hurt me, so I don't have to stop it. And maybe let's come here and talk about that just a little bit. Some little more thought out little patches that are darker. Right? And you can play these dry edges versus these soft edges. Always super entertaining. And you can see how it's like the paper is drier, but it's not bone dry. So there's this mild softening where it's moisture to the brush. Get a little bit more of that into here. And then I can come along here in the front, creating this darker patch. If I need to, I can darken it with a little of my phthalo. Isn't that crazy? And it just looks beautiful, doesn't it?
It really does.
I think it's always fun to sit there and play with these layers or spaces in the painting. I'm also giving this space a little bit more time. I don't want it quite so shiny when I put the next bit, so I'm taking this as an opportunity to maybe get a little flower out there. And that's going to be just dropping little bits of pink pigment all through here, saying these little flowers are maybe perhaps more noticeable. You know, I think it's important to do that and just get a little more of my yellow. And I find that if I add that to some of the space where the red is, I get some really interesting effects. These two kind of work together. And it sort of implies that there's several types of flowers that are out there that I am contending with. And letting this come into maybe different spaces. Now, there I feel like it's too saturated. So what I did is I rinsed in the water. And I came here and I softened that saturation. Can you see how I did that?
Yeah.
And I may even come and distantly say something about the pink. But I'm going to try to say it in a much softer value scale so it pushes it back. Sometimes we call that as atmospheric perspective. Now I feel like I'm starting to get a space here that's going pretty well. So I'm going to get out a bunch of my green. I like that. I'm going to get a bunch of my phthalo blue. And that makes quite a dark color. And you can just carefully create a bush shape. Bush shapes are generally randomized little fellows. And it's real fun if everything is playing against those soft and hard edges. And this is quite a dark color. So this, believe it or not, is the lightest color of my bush. And then as I'm going forward, I'm going to just keep adding a little bit of a darker value so that it feels like, you know, there could be something. And then it's also fun to take the tip of your brush and make some of these little more defined grass light. But it works because that's dry there, right? That's what we're doing. We're just playing along that space. Just on the tip of your brush, pulling it out. And you'll notice that one of the things that I do is I make sure that my grass doesn't all go that same direction. And just take them over here too. You might have. You can even bring some high ones up over here. It does, but it definitely creates space for you to be in. Now, there's this wonderful little tree that's going to happen here, and it's going to be a little bit of this green, but I'm going to add some brown in there so that it's more of an evergreen. When plants are hardier and they're very established, that green deepens, right? And that deepening green, I think, attracts more sunlight and allows them to do more photosynthesis on their highly adaptive needles and different leaves. So let's put one of those up here. Now, here's what I'm going to say about trees. We're going to make this little shape. And of course, you guys have a traceable. And those are all on the website now, aren't they, John?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have our traceables and stuff. But what I want you to do is I want you to make a little tree shape. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to make sure that my little edges are rough and kind of crazy thought out. And I don't mind this little area where it's like maybe a little bleedy. There you go. Because I think it's important to remember that, you know, this little fellow here, and I'm doing a lot of this dry brush, letting these little leaves be defined by the brush and making these little random shapes. See, I'm just making random shapes.
Mm-hmm.
You could transfer this all on with pencil and then work it in, practice those techniques before ever trying to freehand it like this. I think that's the barrier to watercolor for some people is, you know, the idea of how am I going to freehand a tree? I haven't done a tree since kindergarten. So you wouldn't necessarily in that segment freehand a tree. You would follow along with the trace. So let's get that blue-green going again in here and work it through here so we have some deep spaces, right? Some deep space with the tree. So generally, trees underneath are darker. The underside of them tends to be because the light is generally on top of them, shining down, and the foliage creates a break. You got to make sure that you're showing that. And you can always add little bits of leaves that are further away from the main tree. And not every place you put a leaf Do you have to put a branch or any of that? I'm rinsing out. I'm going to go ahead and get my brown. I'm going to get some Payne's Gray into my brown because I want it to be a fairly dark and hardy little tree trunk. I'm going to come right here, up on the brush on the tip, right into the tree. And I'm going to bring a little support branch that maybe wanders out here. Trees are thicker at the base and they get more defined as they move up. So having little branches, different little places even coming out of that tree can be very helpful. And I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little bit of a dried twig that might have come here and maybe this little fellow broke, so that that part of all of that is pretty well thought out. And then when I have that, I'm going to add another little layer, and I go right into the wet of the trunk because it's going to blend into that and soften it. And look, we're going to just say that there's just this final little patch of grass like we might want to talk about. And then we have the most important decision to make.
What's that?
Where we're going to put the little bird.
Oh.
Because there should be little birds, I feel. So over here in the distance, I'm going to just make some little V's of some friendly little birds. Maybe they're not friendly. Maybe they're like hitchhiker's. We don't know them at this point in our painting, but we're going to assume that we would only paint birds that came to like be with us peacefully, right? And so I'm going to sign over here. I'm going to get a little of this color, and I'm going to come right here, and I'm going to just give a little signature. I try to sign things in a way that they aren't too disruptive to the whole composition of the piece. But look, that's just a basic little mountainscape that you can do. Look at that little mountainscape. Look, you got some mountains. You got some hard edges. You got some sky. You got some flowers. That's how you start, right? You're just like putting things in. There's things that are far away. There are things that are closer. Far away, things are more muted. Closer, things are more saturated. Most of the time, obviously. In landscape painting, all those rules can change depending on atmospheric conditions. But for this type of painting on this type of day, that's what you'd expect. Listen, John and I,
Oh, yeah.
we think you're pretty awesome. And we hope you're painting with these watercolors, and we hope you think this new format is really cool because we're pretty excited about it. We think this is great for you to be able to learn how to watercolor. We want you to give it a try. Definitely tell us about it. Definitely share the pictures with us. Check out the website for the IGTV because then you can find all the episodes there, all the traceables, all the support materials. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. And we want to see you in the studio really soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.